Hey everybody, welcome to my latest Stories in a Song video here on YouTube. Today I got a song here by the Yardbirds called Heart Full of Soul. And in the background behind me, on the TV back there, is playing Heart Full of Soul by the Yardbirds. This song was released in 1965 and written by Graham Gouldman. This is my first Yardbirds song on my YouTube playlist, my karaoke songs, and my 295th video on there in total. This is a song that would have fit in well at the rock and bowl night at the bowling alley I went to in Ontario, but I don't remember it playing there. This one I first heard even longer ago than that, sometime in the late 80s, coming from our next door neighbor's radio, blasting oldies tunes in the backyard. Many years later I heard it on the Jukebox Oldies Stingray TV channel. Then several years after that, during COVID restrictions, I sang it my one and only time at a Dooley's karaoke night here in Miramichi. The main thing I remember about that night is having to sing my songs while sitting in a chair at a table rather than standing on the stage because of the COVID restrictions. Today is the first time I've sung the song since then. Now, here's some information about the background of Heart Full of Soul. Guitarist Eric Clapton left the Yardbirds in March 1965 because of a perceived shift in musical direction. Inspired in part by the addition of guitarist Jeff Beck, who replaced Clapton, the group began to experiment with different musical styles. Beck had more varied influences and used electronically enhanced guitar effects, which he brought to the group's sound. The use of a fuzz box was new at the time, as was incorporating feedback into musical passages. When preparing for a follow-up single to their first record chart hit, For Your Love, the song's writer, Graham Gouldman, provided a demo for a new song. Music critic Richie Unterberger described Gouldman as, quote, a genius at effectively alternating tempos and major minor modes, unquote, as used in Heart Full of Soul. The shift in tempo and use of double time was also a feature of the Yardbirds' live performances, known as a Rave Up. At the time, popular music at large was seen as becoming more experimental. Gouldman's arrangement was perceived as creating an exotic sound. Yardbirds drummer Jim McCarty recalled that, quote, the riff on the demo by Gouldman suggested a sitar, unquote, and that the group's manager, Giorgio Gomelsky, hired a sitar and a tabla player for a recording session. Beck biographer Martin Power says that, quote, that For Your Love had been made more memorable by a prominent harpsichord part played by Brian Auger, and that may have influenced Gomelsky's decision. Beck also believes that the addition of an unusual instrument was an attempt to follow the successful incorporation of a harpsichord in their first hit. The use of sitar was a new approach, and several months later the Beatles recorded Norwegian Wood, the first rock song released to include a sitar part. Session guitarist Jimmy Page, who would later join the Yardbirds, was working in an adjacent studio and attended the session. His interest was piqued, and after the session he bought the musician's sitar, which Page later used for his own recordings. And now here's some information about the songwriter of Heart Full of Soul, Graham Gouldman. He was born Graham Keith Gouldman on May 10th, 1946, so he is now age 78, born in Broughton, Salford, Lancashire, England, near Manchester in northwest England. He is also a singer and musician, best known as the co-lead singer and bassist of the art rock band 10cc. He has been the band's only constant member since its formation in 1972. Before 10cc, Gouldman worked as a freelance songwriter and penned many hits for major rock and pop groups, including the Yardbirds, for whom he also wrote For Your Love and Evil-Hearted You, the Hollies, Look Through Any Window with Charles Silverman and Bus Stop, Herman's Hermits, Listen People, No Milk Today and East West, and Ohio Express, Sausalito is the Place to Go. Gouldman also performed under the alias the Graham Gouldman Orchestra. Before 10cc also, he was a member of rock group The Mockingbirds with future 10cc bandmate Kevin Godley. They were a comparatively anonymous audience warm-up band for BBC TV's Top of the Pops, when Gouldman recalled, quote, "There was one strange moment when the Yardbirds appeared on the show, doing For Your Love, which was a song that I'd written. Everyone clamored around them, and there I was, just part of an anonymous group. I felt strange that night, hearing them play my song," unquote. Gouldman, in his early years, was also a member of the Whirlwinds. In the 1980s, he was a member of Wax with Andrew Gold, and The Crowd, a charity group formed specifically to produce a charity record for a fire at UK soccer team Bradford City's stadium. Gouldman and Gold co-own a private record label called For Your Love. Gouldman is the 872nd most covered composer or author. He has written or co-written 37 songs that have been released by more than one artist, including Heartful of Soul, from I Never Should Have Kissed You, originally by the Mockingbirds on February 12, 1965, to Single Tonight, originally by Graham Gouldman in 2000. His most covered song is I'm Not in Love, originally by 10cc, on March 11, 1975, which has been covered by 155 different artists. Heartful of Soul is fourth on that list, having been covered by 61 different artists. Excuse me. I'll say more about the cover versions of Heartful of Soul later. This is my first Gouldman-written song on YouTube. Gouldman was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2014. Now, here's some information about the Yardbirds' recording and release of Heartful of Soul. The Yardbirds' first attempt to record Heartful of Soul was on April 13, 1965, at Advision Studios in London. The session began with the sitar player, who was described by drummer Jim McCarty as someone the band found at the Indian restaurant down the street, playing the distinctive instrumental hook or riff. However, he was unfamiliar with the type of sound the group was trying to achieve. Quote, it didn't have any groove to it, Beck felt. Unquote. McCarty added, quote, "It was fine in principle, but while the tablas sounded okay, the sitar just wasn't up front enough. It just didn't cut through," unquote. Beck then developed a guitar part to replace the sitar line. He elaborated in an interview. Quote, "The sitar player couldn't get the 4/4 time signature right. It was a hopeless waste of time. So I said, look, is this the figure? I had the fuzz machine, a tone blender, going. We did one take. It sounded outrageous. So they kept the tabla player, who could just about make it work. They rushed that out, and the rest was a roller coaster ride," unquote. According to McCarty, Beck developed the riff after borrowing Page's prototype fuzz box, designed for him by Roger Mayer. When he played the lick for the band, they felt that it was a perfect fit. Quote, "This great sounding riff emerged. I mean, Beck just nailed it," unquote, rhythm guitarist Chris Draja recalled. The group returned to Advision on April 20th to complete the song. Beck was able to achieve the sitar-like hook by bending the higher notes on his guitar using his own Sola Sound tone bender, not tone blender, unit to get the distinctive tone. Music writer Alan DePerna describes it as, quote, "microtonal string bending," unquote, while Ralph biographer David French calls Beck's sound a, quote, "violin-like fuzz," unquote. While simultaneously sounding the open D string, he also added a droning quality reminiscent of the sitar's sympathetic strings. Beck's contribution was described in a June 1965 single pre-release review in Beat Instrumental as providing an oriental touch, unquote, quote unquote, and it was seen as helping to introduce, quote, "the psychedelic subgenre known as raga rock," unquote, according to DePerna. William Echard adds, Heartful of Soul, released in June 1965, is often said to have marked the arrival of raga rock and be pivotal in shaping the look and sound of 1960s psychedelia, unquote. Music writers also identify Beck's use of a fuzz box as a milestone. According to French, Heartful of Soul, quote, "Heartful of Soul was one of the first significant uses of fuzz guitar on record, taped a month before the Stones recorded I Can't Get No Satisfaction," while Lavazzoli states that the song is, quote, "the first time such a tone had been used, soon to be employed by Keith Richards," unquote. Unterberger commented, however, that the song does not rely on gimmicks and has other aspects that make it compelling. He added that the vocal parts by lead singer Keith Relf, backed by atmospheric harmonies, provide contrasting melancholic and upbeat sections. According to French, quote, "the new single's melancholy, hard-bitten lyrics were a perfect match to Keith's voice." The song is, unquote, the song is partly propelled by a strummed acoustic guitar by Ralph, giving it an element of contemporary folk music or folk rock. McCarty and session bassist Ron Prentice comprise the rhythm section. Yardbirds bassist Paul Samwell Smith is listed as musical director on the Columbia 45 RPM single. Gomelsky received the credit as the song's producer. Heartful of Soul was released as the Yardbirds' first single since Clapton's departure. In the UK, Columbia issued it on June 4th, 1965, with Epic Records following on July 2nd, 1965 in the US. The picture sleeve used by Epic featured a photo of the Clapton lineup instead of the Beck lineup. Epic's For Your Love album, released the month before, included a photo of Beck but no image nor mention of Clapton. Steeled Blues, a blues instrumental featuring Beck on slide guitar and Ralph on harmonica, is included as the single's B-side. Heartful of Soul saw its first album release on the Yardbirds' second American LP record, Having a Rave Up. In 1965, on November the 15th, it was released. Having a Rave Up with the Yardbirds was the full title. In Canada, Capitol Records included the song on both their first album, titled Heartful of Soul, also released in 1965, also known as Presenting the Yardbirds, and second album, Having a Rave Up, released in 1965. It was also chosen for the popular American compilation The Yardbirds' Greatest Hits in 1967. In the UK, the earliest album appearance was on Remember the Yardbirds, a collection of pre-Yardbirds, also known as Roger the Engineer, material, released in 1971 after the group disbanded. Numerous later compilations include it, such as Ultimate from 2001, the comprehensive career retrospective released by Rhino Records. The single entered the Billboard Hot 100 Top 40 on August 21st, 1965, becoming the Yardbirds' second career U.S. Top 40 hit. It charted for 8 weeks and peaked at number 9. On other charts, it reached number 2 on the RPM chart in Canada and record retailer chart in the UK. It's probably the reason why I heard it on the oldies radio stations when I was a kid. Number 10 on the VG Lista chart in Norway. Number 12 on the Cashbox Top Singles chart in the US. And number 22 on the GFK chart in West Germany. Now, here's some information about the cover versions of Heartful of Soul. 78 cover versions of Heartful of Soul have been released to date. 8 of those are instrumentals. 1 is in Catalan, 5 are in Finnish, 1 is in German, 5 are in Spanish, 1 is in Greek, 1 is in Italian, 1 is in Chinese, 2 are in French, and 1 is in Malay. That leaves 52 in English. Of those 52, I'm familiar with only 7 of the artists who have covered it. I will mention 3 more that I am unfamiliar with to bring the total up to a nice round 10. So, the 7 artists who I am familiar with who have released covers are, first by American pop act Gary Lewis and the Playboys, in February 1966 on their Liberty album, She's Just My Style. Gary Lewis is the son of comedian Jerry Lewis. Second, by American singer, guitarist, and actor from Stockton, California, Chris Isaak on December 11, 1986, on his self-titled Warner Brothers Records album. This is rated the 3rd best version on secondhandsongs.com. When I saw Chris Isaak in there and saw his date of birth, I couldn't believe that he's going to turn 70 years old next year. The only picture in my mind I have of Chris Isaak is him as a young man. Next we have the 3rd cover version by American rock band LA Guns in June 1999 on their Deadline Music album, Greatest Hits and Black Beauties. I can thank local radio voice Darcy McLaughlin for making me aware of LA Guns. Nope, I'd never heard of LA Guns until I heard the local radio show where they would play old rock and roll songs from the 80s and 90s and earlier. But LA Guns was on there and I'd never heard of them until then, so thanks to that show. 4th by American metal band Dokken in 2002 on their CMC International album, Long Way Home. 5th by Canadian progressive rock trio formed in 1968 in Toronto, Rush, on June 29, 2004, on their Anthem EP, Feedback. This is rated the 5th best version. This EP also includes the Yardbirds tune, Shapes of Things. 6th by American lead singer of the Cowsills, Billy Cowsill, in 2004, on his Indelible Music Inc. album. Live from the Crystal Ballroom, Calgary, Alberta, July 1985. On Friday, July 5th, 1985, Billy Cowsill and his band opened a show for Katie Lang in the Crystal Ballroom at the Palliser Hotel in Calgary, Alberta. This album came from that set. And 7th by American rock band Blondie on November 25th, 2014, on their Blondie album, Ex-Offender, Remastered, a recording from a live radio show on KSAN-FM, San Francisco, a concert at the Old Waldorf in San Francisco on September 21st, 1977. 3 unfamiliar to me artists who have covered Heartful of Soul are, first by American vocal group The Johnny Mann Singers in 1965 on their Liberty album, Roses and Rainbows. Second by American band Free Will in 1977 on their Guinness Records album, Here's Free Will. This is rated the 5th best version on secondhandsongs.com. And third by a German vocal group, Fruit, in January 1980 on their Hansa single with B-side Hey John. I like that title. This is rated the 2nd best version. There are 68 more cover versions of Heartful of Soul. Now here's some information about the Yardbirds. The Yardbirds are an English rock band formed in London in 1963. The band started the careers of 3 of rock's most famous guitarists. Eric Clapton, born Eric Patrick Clapton on March 30th, 1945, and he is now 79, born in Ripley, Surrey, England, who was a member from 1963 to 1965. Jeff Beck, born Jeffrey Arnold Beck on June 24th, 1944 in Wallington, Surrey, now Greater London, England, and died on January 10th, 2023, aged 78 in East Sussex, England, from a bacterial meningitis infection, who replaced Clapton and was a member from 1965 to 1966, and Jimmy Page, who was a member from 1966 to 1968, all of whom ranked in the top 5 of Rolling Stone magazine's list of 100 greatest guitarists. The band's other members during 1963 to 1968 were vocalist harmonica player Keith Relf, born William Keith Relf on March 22nd, 1943, almost the same birthday as me, born in Richmond, England, and died on May 12th, 1976, aged 33, in Hounslow, Greater London, England, from electrocution while playing an ungrounded electric guitar. Anthony Topham, born on July 3rd, 1947, in Southall, England, and died on January 23rd, 2023, aged 75, only, 10 days? Only 10 days apart from one of the other members of this band. Topham was 75 when he died. No cause of death was given. He was the original lead guitarist, replaced by Clapton. Drummer Jim McCarty, born James Stanley McCarty on July 25th, 1943. He is now 81, born in Walton, Liverpool, England. Rhythm guitarist Chris Dreja, born Christopher Walenti Dreja on November 11th, 1945. He is now 79, born in Surbiton, Surrey, England. And bassist Paul Samuel Smith, born Paul Granville Smith on May 8th, 1943. And he is now 81, born in Brentford, West London, England. With Dreja switching to bass when Samuel Smith departed in 1966. The band had a string of hits throughout the mid-1960s, 6 Billboard Top 40 hits, including For Your Love, Heartful of Soul, Shapes of Things, and Over, Under, Sideways, Down. Originally a blues-based band noted for their signature Rave Up and instrumental breaks, the Yardbirds broadened their range into pop, pioneered psychedelic rock and early hard rock, and contributed to many electric guitar innovations of the mid-1960s. Some rock critics and historians also cite their influence on the later punk rock, progressive rock, and heavy metal trends. Following the band's split in July 1968, Relf and McCarty formed Renaissance, and Page formed the New Yardbirds in October 1968, which evolved into Led Zeppelin. The Yardbirds reformed in 1992, featuring McCarty and Dreja as the only original members. Dreja left the band in 2012, leaving McCarty as the sole original member of the band. The band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992. They were included at number 89 in Rolling Stone's list of the 100 greatest artists of all time, and ranked number 37 on VH1's 100 greatest artists of hard rock. Now, here's some information about the Yardbirds' recording history and discography. A total of 302 records have been released on the Yardbirds, and under various similar names, as a band and with other artists between 1964 and 2023. They have recorded for the Columbia and Epic labels early on in the UK and US respectively, then later in the UK for the Charlie, Old Gold, Edsel, Scoop 33, Easy Action, Ministry of Sound, and Demon labels, and in the US for the Repeat, Collectibles, and Sundays labels. Their discography includes 6 studio albums, 2 EPs, 12 live albums, more than 10 compilation albums, 16 singles, and 3 music videos. Alright, now I'm going to sing Heart Full of Soul. Been out to karaoke last night at Dooley's, and so I might have a bit of a case of karaoke throat today, but I'm going to give this thing a try anyway. See how I do at it. Should be fun. Alrighty, here it is, Heart Full of Soul. Yardbirds. Let's see here now. So, Heart Full of Soul, as made famous by the Yardbirds, written by Graham Gouldman. Let's do it. Sick at heart and lonely, deep in dark despair, thinking one thought only, where is she, tell me where? And if she says to you, she don't love me, just give her my message, tell her of my plea, and I know, well, if she had me back again, oh, I would never make her sad. I got a heart full of soul. Yeah, play it now. Woo! And I know if she had me back again, well, I would never make her sad. I got a heart full of soul. She's been gone such a long time, longer than I can bear. But if she says she wants me, tell her that I'll be there. And if she says to you, she don't love me, just give her my message, tell her of my plea, and I know, well, if she had me back again, oh, I would never make her sad. I got a heart full of soul. Yeah, Heart Full of Soul by the Yardbirds, 1965. Another great old British rock and roll tune right there. Woo. Well, that was a lot of fun. Hadn't sung that song in close to 5 years, so I hope it came across all right. Well, thank you all for watching and listening. And I got to take me a break about a week off of these videos now. I'm going to start making my next one next Friday. A week from today, and it is going to be a song that I love so much. If I was stranded on a desert island, this is one of the songs I would want to have with me. House of the Rising Sun by the Animals. I actually did that song last night at Dooley's at karaoke night, so we'll have a run at that one next weekend. And by about evening on Saturday night, I should be putting it up for you all to see. Alright, so thanks for watching and listening, and have a great day, and remember, be here next time, because I ain't even started yet. Bye now.